Bitcoin is back over $100,000, and I explained to you why Bitcoin is coming to every corner of the financial system and what it means for you and your portfolio. Then we get into Mark Zuckerberg and Meta. He just came out with a brand new video where he recommits to free speech. He's moving some of his teams out of California, and he talks about what he thinks content is going to look like in the new era of Donald Trump as president. On top of that, we then get into congestion pricing and this new tax that was put in New York City. Why you need to pay attention is because this tax is coming to a city near you, and it's ultimately another insane move by the government to take money out of your pocket. And then last but not least, we finish up with Justin Trudeau and what's going on in Canada, why weak leadership ends up leading to bad situations. And then we even talk about the media and how the media is evolving over time and where we think that's going as well. This conversation's packed with tons of insights and a few hot takes that you may or may not agree with. So we'd love to hear what you agree with and what you don't. Leave a comment or let us know on Twitter. Here's my latest conversation with Pompliano. All right, Polina, what's the first topic?
All right. Bitcoin is over $100,000. MicroStrategy is buying more. And you said that you said Bitcoin is the new S&P 500.
We're back. Everyone who thought Bitcoin was over, it had peaked, the bull market was over, they're wrong. And we're back, already back over $100,000. $100,000 is a very important threshold because it's a psychological thing. Below $100,000, the number is just smaller than what is over $100,000. And so I think that whenever we are over $100,000, people get excited. They realize Bitcoin is winning. Now, the most interesting part to me is, yes, I do believe that Bitcoin is the new S&P 500. The S&P 500 is benefiting from a lot of nonsense, but it's not even outperforming gold. And so anytime that you have a benchmark that can be outperformed by a commodity with no cash flows, it's probably not a good benchmark. The reason why all of the hedge funds like to pick the S&P 500 is because they think that they can beat it, but most of them don't. There's only a handful of hedge funds that actually beat the S&P 500 every year. Nobody beats Bitcoin. There's not one hedge fund that beat Bitcoin. So if you can't beat it, you got to buy it. That's my general philosophy. Now, here's what I think is the most interesting part about Bitcoin right now is we saw the adoption of Bitcoin. It started with individuals. Then we got the financial institutions started to come in and the public corporations. Everyone knows that whole story. Obviously, the ETF's the greatest product launch in Wall Street history. Michael Saylor, MicroStrategy, many of the copycats, they're all buying Bitcoin as well. But most people are not yet talking about this idea of taking Bitcoin and it infiltrating into the corners of traditional finance. What I mean by that is the Newmark CEO came out. He said, look, we're going to offer a brand new type of mortgage on real estate that allows you to, rather than cash out in dollars, what we are going to do is we are going to give you the money, you pay off your old loan, you now have our new loan. Any additional money can be either used to improve the property or to buy Bitcoin. And that Bitcoin becomes part of the collateral package. Now, all of a sudden, you have real estate and Bitcoin coming together. A second example, you have Grant Cardone. He recently launched a Bitcoin real estate fund. He said, I want to buy a piece of real estate. You guys are going to give me money. I think it's like $87 million. I'm going to buy the real estate, which is like $75 million. The rest I'm going to put in Bitcoin. And then the cash flow that comes off of this property, I'm going to buy more Bitcoin inside of the fund. Rather than pay out as a dividend, I'm going to get you more and more Bitcoin exposure. Interesting. Then we can go and we can look at something like Michael Saylor's brand new perpetual preferred equity. What that means is basically it's a new type, or it's an old type, but it's new for MicroStrategy, way to get different type of investors to invest in these companies. So insurance companies, for example, really like these ideas because it's a perpetual offering that has yield, etc. Next, we can then go to BlackRock. BlackRock took their fixed income fund, I think they call it the Strategic Income Opportunities Fund or something, which is just traditional fixed income. And they got approval and then bought Bitcoin inside of that fund. So you take fixed income, you take Bitcoin, you put those two together. Now, I think the Bitcoin allocation is small. It's like single digit percentage. But if you're competing with all of the other fixed income funds and you got a little bit of Bitcoin, you're likely to outperform. So now you have the best performing fixed income fund. Next, you have Meanwhile, a company that is a private startup. They're doing Bitcoin life insurance. So the policy and the payout is denominated in Bitcoin. Now, why do I go through all those examples? It's because what we are seeing is that only a certain percentage of people are going to buy more than 1 to 5% of their portfolio in Bitcoin. Most people are just going to buy between 1 to 5%. They're going to say, hey, I got some Bitcoin. It sits over there. I don't do anything with it. I just hold it. 1 to 5%. But if Bitcoin wants to continue to get more and more capital inflows, sure, there's large pools of capital that just buy direct. But I think the next big leg of capital to come into Bitcoin is actually through these other types of products. So a lot of people have more than 5% in real estate. A lot of people have more than 5% in fixed income. A lot of people have more than 5% in their life insurance policy. And so what's going to happen is Bitcoin is going to infiltrate into these corners. People are going to be buying life insurance, fixed income, real estate, etc. But they're going to be getting kind of indirect exposure to Bitcoin. And when that happens, I think that will be a massive inflow of capital for Bitcoin. There's only 21 million. It's a finite supply. That will continue to be this persistent bid for Bitcoin, and the price will continue to go up over the coming years.
Very interesting. What do you think the next psychological threshold is?
$1 million.
Oh, really? Not even like 500K?
No, $1 million.
Oh, interesting.
You got to put a zero on it. And so we're going to $1 million. I don't know when it's going to happen, but I do think that Bitcoin will hit $1 million one day. And when you think about that, look, it's 10x from here. A lot of people get excited about 10x. A lot of people don't get excited about 10x. It depends on what the time frame is. And one of the things that I think Bitcoin investors are really good at is seeing into the future. What they're probably really bad at is doing relative comparisons. And so if Bitcoin takes 20 years to get to $1 million, that's obviously not as great of a return as if it does it in 3 years.
Yeah.
And so I do think that there's this element of trying to figure out, okay, what is the compound annual growth rate going to be moving forward? Now, there are people who will argue that the 50, 60% that it's averaged over the last couple of years, if we just extrapolate that out, Bitcoin goes to a really high price. I personally believe that the compound annual growth rate of Bitcoin is going to continue to go down as the asset gets larger. That's usually what happens. If that occurs, it doesn't mean that it's going to go to 5%. Right? It's probably going to still continue to outperform the stock market. And so maybe it's at 20, 25, 30%. Maybe it's 35%. Still very attractive rate of return. You're still outperforming most hedge funds. But all of a sudden, it's going to extend that amount of time it takes to get to $1 million, et cetera. And so I think that's really the thing to think about is like, what is going to be the compound annual growth rate of Bitcoin moving forward? If you could know that number, then you would know whether you should be buying Bitcoin or doing something else, right? But if it's 5%, you probably can generate 5% somewhere else. If it's 40%, well, there's not very many people in the world who can generate more than 40% a year every single year. And so Bitcoin obviously would be if you can't beat it, then you got to buy it.
Let me ask you like a somewhat personal question. I watched you kind of go through this journey of like, finding out about Bitcoin, understanding what it is, sitting there, learning about it in 2017, but like nobody was talking about it, to now where everybody's talking about it, everybody's buying it. How do you feel now?
Let's see what happens.
But like, do you feel a little like
vindicated
or like, like it paid off,
No, look, I think that there's an element of, when I first discovered Bitcoin, I thought that I'd missed it, right? In 2016, I started mining ETH and started getting into this whole space, et cetera. I was like, oh my God, I'd heard about this years ago. Why didn't I buy any? I mean, very common, I think, experience for people. I don't think that I really fully understood how much the legacy financial system did not like Bitcoin or how dumb they thought it was until 2018. So really 2016, 2017 was all like, my experience was on the internet, and people there loved it, right? They were understanding it. They were adopting it. It was very kind of a bottoms up thing. In 2018, there are 3 experiences that I had that I think really hammered home to me, oh my God, these people don't get it. The first was I went on CNBC and Kevin O'Leary was screaming at me saying that he forbid me from putting 50% of my net worth or more in Bitcoin. He was telling me how dumb it was, etc. Now, I love Kevin. We've become friends. He's incredibly smart. And the reason why he's smart is because he changed his mind. He's got new information. He changed his mind, right? But I remember being like, oh my God, like this guy's like on TV. I'd never met him before. He had a very visceral reaction to this. And man, they are bringing me on TV because they think I'm like the idiot in the room, and they're like, using me as like the whipping boy. Like, okay, that's kind of crazy. The second experience was I went and Mark Yusko took me to go meet Julian Robertson. Julian Robertson is obviously a very famous guy who unfortunately recently passed away. And
Mark Yusko is Morgan Creek.
And Mark took me to go meet Julian to talk about Bitcoin. And Julian is famous because he had Tiger Management. He seeded a bunch of other hedge funds, Tiger Global, etc. And in that conversation, I saw what it was like to be somebody later in their life, but still remaining intensely curious. He was asking questions. He was bringing in analysts. Like, he just wanted to understand it, right? And I think he was like 80 something years old at the time. So it was a surreal experience. But when we left, I remember saying to myself, I don't know if he's going to buy any, right? Like he's obviously super curious. He like, it's easy to see why this guy's been successful, because still at this age, his mind wasn't really rigid, etc. Like he wanted to be successful. Then we went, and I don't want to say who the investor is, but we went to go see another kind of legend of Wall Street, somebody that everyone would know, everyone is very fond of. He actually has a fantastic reputation. It was a very short meeting. It was only about 12 to 15 minutes. It was not supposed to be 12 to 15 minutes, supposed to be a regular meeting. But when we started talking about Bitcoin, he kind of had this attitude towards me of like, oh, that's like a cute thing. Like, leave your papers here. We'll look at it. Like, thanks for coming. And I remember walking outside, and Mark was very disappointed because this was a guy he had known for a long time. You know, he thought that the guy would be a little bit more receptive to it. And I remember saying to Mark that I was excited that the guy had that reaction. And Mark was like, what are you talking about? Like, you know, we could have raised money. We could have done whatever. And I said, no, Mark, that's the opportunity. The opportunity is that guy could go buy a lot of Bitcoin right now, but he's not going to, because he doesn't get it. He doesn't care. He's not intellectually curious, etc. Our opportunity is that we can go buy the Bitcoin before he buys the Bitcoin, right?
Do you know if he ever bought Bitcoin or changed his mind?
Funny enough, a couple years later, this guy's son reached out to me and he said, hey, I've been trying to convince my dad of this. Would you mind doing a Zoom call with me and my dad? And so I did it. And, you know, I said to him, I said, look, you know, you probably don't remember, but I came to your office, did this whole thing. He was incredibly polite, etc. And one of the things he said to me was, he goes, you know, I'm not in the business of identifying disruptive technologies. So I'm not surprised that when you told me about something new, I kind of, you know, pulled away. He goes, because actually I'm in the business of finding things that don't change. Right. So it's kind of a Warren Buffett versus maybe like a Jeff Bezos or an Elon Musk. And so what was interesting to me is this guy now is starting to, one, as a family, they've bought some, but now he's in a certain investment field where Bitcoin is starting to kind of infiltrate. And so some of the products that they are going to be buying or creating probably will have Bitcoin in it, not because there's some crazy Bitcoin bull, but because they understand, hey, if we have our traditional kind of investment strategy and we put a little bit of Bitcoin, there's a lot of value that can get created there. And so I just think that, you know, if you kind of look back over the last almost decade or so, it's not so much about being vindicated or being right, wrong, etc. What I think is the most interesting part is that Bitcoin taught me about everything else. Right? It was through the lens of Bitcoin that I learned so much about monetary policy, that I learned about geopolitics, that I learned about energy, that I learned about, you know, infrastructure, that I learned about all these different things, even history. And now what is cool to see is that there are people who are coming into the market who bring a different level of validation and bring a different level of knowledge. And so Bitcoin is this thing that if you're interested in it, I think you can remain intellectually curious. You continue to learn more and more. And it's like, you know, the perpetual preferred equity offering. I had no clue what that was. I hear it. I got to go research it. I got to go do it. Whatever. Right. And all of a sudden you're like, okay, cool. I get it. Like, I understand why it is. You can look in history and see all the people who've done this. You can go and you can check out, you know, who currently has these out there, whatever. And I think that's the beauty of Bitcoin. And so, you know, I think one of the things Bitcoin will do is teach you to be intellectually humble and say, hey, look, it's not about being right or wrong. It's about trying to constantly understand something that is ever changing.